shifts. We've got some new state rules and there's custom chip technology. One of the big lessons this week is the AI that you are building on is not yours to fully control. Apple made a deal with Google and it's running Siri on Google's models. And Anthropic had to switch off its most powerful models overnight after a government order. And there's a lot of debate on how much was government and how much was internal. And if they're going public, how much of this is to get attention and press? We don't know. A team out of MIT also is dedicated to transparency with showing how much power and water it takes to keep these systems running. We have an article about leading your team through AI adoption. It's the Owner Operator's Guide to Change Management. And you can read the full article that gives you some helpful hints so that your team will be able to implement, because you can't just hand your team a new AI tool and expect them to change how they work overnight. The guide breaks down the human side of bringing AI into your operations. It covers how to manage fear, how to build clear training steps, and create a culture where your staff actually wants to use the technology. And this is based on practical practice that we have had over the last few years with our little team and all the clients that we're working with, as well as research from Stanford and some of the other big ones that have studied change management for a long time, and also AI adoption. And our most requested service lately has been the AI strategy. And with an AI strategy, we will survey your team, see how they're using AI, how they're not using AI, what they're afraid of, and what they'd really like to do with it. And then we do a strategy session together. And with as many team members as you want, you can have it large or limited, and we'll bring everybody together and create a 12-month plan for your company. And then the recommendations will include training and implementation in that, and also a communication plan. All right, this week's news. So ChatGPT loses its dominant share of the AI market. I think maybe this is domestic, not global. But it shows that ChatGPT fell to 46.4% of market share at the end of May. And this marks the first time it slipped below the 50% mark. Other tools like Gemini and Claude are catching up quickly. And the sector is also, so if you look at individual consumers using the tools, they're using it differently than corporate is. And Claude has made a lot of ground on corporate, but if people are in Google workspaces already, they're going over to Gemini. So ChatGPT had this big entry, and now everybody is consolidating and trying to stay within the tools that they already use. So Gemini has seen a really big uptick, and they're up to 27.7% of the market. Claude is at 10.3%. I have seen different numbers. This has been something in the news lately, and I've seen different numbers about usage and the different AI major LLMs. And ChatGPT still has a ton of usage. They have a lot of free accounts, the direct to consumer, as opposed to business accounts. And Claude and Gemini are really coming up there on business accounts. And even people who have Microsoft are going to things like Claude and Gemini because they like the outputs better and they like how it can work, tying together a lot of different tools. And the Microsoft environment is really closed. So, adoption matters more than which tool you're using. And also the flexibility. So, Anthropic, they had to turn off Fable after it came out, and it had been on the market for 4 days, and then they had to turn it off. And if you started to rely on a new model, then that could put your workflows at risk. So it's also important to make sure that you can switch out models if you need to for any of the workflows that you're doing with AI. And MIT researchers built a custom operating system for chips. A team at MIT created a new operating system called Fractal to study how computer chips actually work. Standard systems like Mac OS have too much background noise, like apps running in the background. The noise makes it hard to observe precise chip behavior safely. Fractal acts like a microscope for the hardware. It runs directly on the metal to uncover unknown activities in the processors, which is pretty cool. And hardware sets the limit for the software. And everybody's focusing on these shiny new AI tools. When it comes to the software side of things, researchers are still discovering blind spots in the chips that power them. And so you don't need to understand the deep technical details, but you should recognize that the physical machines running AI are still changing. And the way that AI is run and impacts the hardware on your machine is meaningful. For any of my friends that have been experimenting with OpenClaw and they have destroyed their old laptops or Mac minis, they understand this, and what the limitations are or what the issues are with letting AI run loose. So it's kind of interesting to see. State lawmakers outpace Congress in creating new AI rules. The states in the US have passed 150 AI-related bills in 2025. And Congress is just debating the federal laws, instituting federal laws around AI. The state rules require businesses to disclose when they use AI in regulated fields like healthcare and finance. And some states also demand safety steps for chatbots that act as companions or offer mental health support. And if you are operating in the US, if you're operating in multiple states, it's really important that you understand where your responsibility is and where your liability is in knowing, disclosing tools properly and their use and instructions. And if there is any compliance risk that you carry for your public facing AI. So definitely take a look into your local state if you're in the US and the laws in general. I think most of us can mitigate these risks pretty simply. Anybody who is in healthcare and finance definitely want to pay a little bit closer attention because there are some big potential big compliance issues with that. And we've got a link to a website that can help you learn a little bit more about the different AI laws. And don't forget to run it by your lawyer. Psychologists have been advising patients on the limits of AI therapy bots. A recent survey found that 77% of psychologists say their patients are using AI. More than a third treat it like an extra mental health provider. The American Psychological Association is now guiding therapists to ask patients about their AI use. They warn that chatbots lack privacy and can give harmful advice during a crisis. And where you first made money off of your likeness, the name, image, likeness. So that could be your voice, your photos, your videos. And if you haven't made money off of it, but then an AI company takes it or somebody else takes it and starts to make money off of it, then whose intellectual property is it? Because in typical IP, it's that first, when you first make money off of something, like a new brand of toothpaste, when you first sell it and make money off of it. But if you just had this idea and you didn't sell it and somebody else came out with it and they register the trademark, if they start selling first, then they'll likely win in an IP dispute over the trademark. And so there's this issue with humans that is nuanced as well, because, their AI can take pictures and it can start to make ads and use people's likenesses that have never made money off their likeness before. And again, this is a state by state issue so far. And there is not an overarching law, like there aren't federal laws about this. There are some state laws, especially in California, because Hollywood. And I would say use those most conservative laws as your guideline of how you treat intellectual property, because likely it'll get rolled out and they could use it as precedents as well if you ended up in any sort of court case. But get permission to use people's information. That's basic, from even using people's photos. I used to do photography. I did it in school. And in my very early days, I did photography, and we'd always have to walk around with a stack of photo release forms and getting people to sign releases, because I did photography at concerts. And so there would be a lot of random people around. And that was just part of what you did. So we need to consider that for these purposes as well. And then our tool picks of the week, we have a workflow and SOP creator. So this tool will help you to define the workflows in your business. It will also help you refine existing workflows and help you map out where you can use AI automation and where you should be using humans and which humans should be at which parts of the process. It's really helpful if you have nothing at all to start with and you just start having conversations with it because you need some workflows or SOPs. And then we turn those workflows and SOPs into agents and these automated processes. And then ClickUp, which is the tool that we use for project management. Opus Clip is the tool that we use to chop up videos into short form content for social media, and it puts the text over the videos.